Coming in at number 5, origin story. Navajo medicine men. The Navajo medicine men, also known as the Navajo healers, are sacred people who have personal powers that give them the ability to cure the sick and help the injured. They are often called upon to perform healing ceremonies. They are said to be the conductor of magic people, and they have the power to protect others. Their healing practices are made up of chants and songs. Throughout their lifetime, they can only learn a handful of songs and chants, as each one requires a great deal of time and effort to learn and perfect. These songs are passed down from generation to generation. Once they feel like they have perfected their song, they use them in conducting their life's work. These people are said to be very powerful, but on the downside, the medicine men can also use their powers for evil if that's what they decide to do. And if they decide to go this route, then they must complete a specific ritual. After completing this ritual, they will make a transformation into the most feared skinwalker of them all. To become a skinwalker, the medicine men must perform a ritual act. They must kill someone dear to them, usually a close relative. In some legends, it's said that they eat a part of this person as well. In killing this loved one, the skinwalker becomes more of a beast than a human. Once the act is complete, the skinwalker can shape-shift into any animal they choose.
Number 4 on this list is the white face. This story is especially scary because it seems like the skinwalker is actually stalking our victim. Ranker says, "My roommate has told me this story a few times and I want to see if anyone else has had similar experiences. As he tells it, he was driving home super late at night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m. in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, both times that this occurred. The first time he was driving alone on a road that has an open field to the left of it when out of nowhere a black figure on all fours bounds up out of the field and across the road in front of his car. As soon as the figure got to the other side of the road, it stops with inhuman quickness, turns around, and looks directly at my roommate. He described the figure as looking simian, completely black except for the face. The creature's face was a stark white human face. Not white as in Caucasian, but white as snow. This happened again a few weeks later, but this time the creature was sitting in a tree. As his car approached, it climbed down the tree, again with inhuman quickness, bounded across the road, stopped on a dime, and turned around and made eye contact with him. This time he had a friend in the car who also saw it and began freaking out. It was the same exact thing as the first time, a simian black body with a snow white expressionless human face. My roommate, ever the curious one, turned the car around and began searching for the creature, but it was nowhere to be seen. What has a totally black and creature-like body, but also a white as snow pale human face? I'll answer that one for you guys. A skinwalker. Scariest part about this one, like I said earlier, is the fact that it went out of its way to find this same guy again. I find it hard to believe that he just happened to stumble upon this creature just out of coincidence. I think it's far more likely that the creature was looking out for this guy and putting itself into spots that it might run into him. Really not a pleasant thought if you think about it. Number 3 on this list is the toy rocking horse. This story doesn't even make any sense at all. It's just next levels of crazy. CVLT Nation says, "My uncle is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down and the dog began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know and it scared the crap out of him." So I'm honestly trying to figure out how the heck it moved like a toy rocking horse. That kind of doesn't make sense, you know? How would it get anywhere if it just kept rocking back and forth? I don't really understand, if I'm being honest, but apparently that's what went down. Which would definitely be enough to scare the bejesus out of me and never go back to the Mojave Desert again. Number 2 on this list is No Ordinary Girl. This is a story, as you may have guessed, about a girl that probably wasn't a girl. Ranker says, "The tale of terror comes all the way from Australia. While walking her dogs out in the Australian bush, a woman encountered a fearful sight. She was enjoying the trail when suddenly her 2 dogs started barking uncontrollably and becoming extremely agitated. Soon she saw what appeared to be a small female child no older than 7. The child had her back to the woman, who was only a bit startled at first as she believed the child was just part of a camping party. However, when the girl turned around, her eyes were lifeless and entirely black. Before the woman could make a break for it, the creature let out an ear-splitting howl and ran off into the bush, never to be seen again. She was left wondering if the child child she saw was someone pulling a prank on her or if it really was a shape-shifting skinwalker. She may never know. Maybe the scariest part about this one is that if this story is true, it means skinwalkers can be found outside of America. Conventional wisdom has kind of said that these creatures are only in North America, but that might not be true. If they're all the way in Australia, then they could literally be anywhere. Hopefully it was just a prank, but based on the circumstances, I kinda doubt it.
And in at number 1, the Dark One. This is a case that was posted onto skinwatcherranch.org. This is a website that documents all of the entities encountered at the ranch. The story of the Dark One is an extremely rare but terrifying story. This being is said to be possibly human, a Sherman trapped in an alternate timeline. Those who have seen this person or spirit describe him as a silent Native American peering through a portal to another dimension. Some even believe he's opened the portal himself. He is also believed to be a gatekeeper to the other side. And as mentioned before, it's extremely rare to actually see him. It's said there's only a 0.03% chance of spotting him.
Number 5 on this list is the orange eyes. As a decently recent university graduate, this story is pretty triggering to me. User John shared his story of how a relaxing midnight stroll turned terrifying when he came face to face with 2 skinwalkers. According to his chilling story, John was out late one summer night. While listening to music and enjoying the cool weather, he walked near a large empty field that was adjacent to a college campus. Suddenly, he felt something staring at him. Shining his flashlight out into the darkness, he saw 2 sets of glowing orange eyes staring back at him. The eyes were at least 7 feet off the ground and stared at him without blinking once. John made a mad dash for safety. As he was running, he turned back to see one of the creatures chasing him. John became even more frightened when he got a better glimpse of the fast-moving creature behind him. It looked like a giant wolf. Quickening his pace, John reached his home safely, but he remains fearful of the monsters he saw that night, which he believes were skinwalkers. I titled this entry Orange Eyes because that, plus the fact that they were 7 feet off the ground, are the biggest things that stick out to me here. A wolf's eyes aren't typically bright orange. They can be a mild hue of that color, but I doubt that it was a mild hue if that's the first thing that stuck out to him in the night. Not to mention the fact that these creatures were 7 feet off the ground and how unnatural that is. Even if for some reason a wolf stood on its hind legs, it still wouldn't be that tall. Whatever it was that was after John that evening doesn't sound like the friendliest of creatures if you ask me. He's probably pretty lucky to have made it out alive. Number 4 on this list is the Grove. So this is a story told by the friend of the person it happened to. CVLT Nation says, I've heard a lot about coyotes and skinwalkers and had a weird experience or two with coyotes. Creepiest was walking up to my sleeping bag being surrounded in paw prints without even hearing them during the night. But never anything paranormal, so to speak. Patrick's story, however, kept me from going back to my favorite backcountry secret stash. He was leaving the area one morning, had been camping there a couple days, and said there was a coyote that always seemed to be close by, like in his peripheral vision, but never overt. He loaded up his truck and started to drive down the wash out to the fire road. At the end of the wash, he could see the coyote following him. When he pulled onto the road, it was running next to him. Now he was freaked out, so he sped up. He said he was going 35 or so, and it was running along beside him. Definitely not possible. When he looked back, the coyote was running on 2 legs and was wearing what Patrick said looked like buckskin pants. An instant later, it was a person wearing a coyote fur keeping pace with his truck. When he looked again, it was gone. We never went back to the Grove after that. Dude, that sounds like something directly out of a fever dream. It was running alongside your car for one, then it was wearing pants, then it was a person wearing pants, and then it was gone? Like literally full-on walking nightmare right there, guys. Also, what is it with these skinwalkers and chasing down cars? We had a few stories in the first part about that as well. I guess they do really just like to run fast.
In at number 3, Arizona. Skinwalkers, like a lot of ancient American urban legends, have roots in Native American folklore. Since this all started back in the 1800s, it's hard to gather specific stories from back then. There's just a lot of generalized facts. But I did manage to find this pretty recent story about a man named Will Filton. And his story goes like this. It's easy to feel uneasy when driving through the desert roads of Arizona, especially late at night. As Will was driving, he hears a slight tap on his window, so he glanced over but saw nothing. He didn't think much of it and he kept driving. Then a few seconds later, he heard it again. This time he looked over and saw what looked like a mutilated half-human creature. The face of a human, but the body of a wolf. He immediately pumped his brakes and looked around for the creature he saw, but he couldn't find it. So he continued to drive, but felt this whole time that this creature was following him. He ended up doing a little research on what he saw, and he was convinced it was a skinwalker.
Number 2 on this list is Yinald-Lushi, a terrifying tale where a young boy was almost taken far too soon. CVLT Nation says, one year when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visits were pretty uneventful, typical boring old people stuff, except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would always peek out the window, and when someone asked what she was doing, she would simply reply, Yinald-Lushi is watching me. This went on for nearly the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my baby brother were in the front yard that evening planting flowers when all of a sudden my grandmother starts shouting, "Get away from that creature. It's not safe." Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake, so we all run inside to see my grandmother clutching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house. Standing out in the yard was a large, black, Great Dane-sized dog. It was staring at my grandmother with an intensity I'd never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and bounded off. I don't remember if it moved unusually fast or not, but do remember it had really deep yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating, "The Yinald-Lushi has found me." She moved a couple weeks after that. So I imagine that the Yinald-Lushi is a special skinwalker that apparently this grandmother knew about. I obviously don't know all the old tales and don't have the same wisdom that she has, but this creature sounds especially bad. As if there was some history between it and the grandmother and it was coming to exact revenge. Very lucky that the young boy was able to make it out of there alive. And finally, number 1 on this list is the 6 Men. This is another story about how some type of beasts were able to keep up with a car. Ranker says, my friend's mission region had a reservation within its boundaries. However, it was relatively far from where he was serving. On one occasion, him and his mission companion were asked to travel further than usual to meet some investigators. This took them near the reservation. On their way home, their car ran out of gas, and it wasn't until late at night that they were able to continue the journey home. My friend chose a different route that took him through some back roads in an attempt to get home sooner. He told us he was driving above the speed limit when he noticed movement in the woods lining the road. Because coyotes were common in the area, he took little notice at first. Then he looked out the window and slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop jolted his companion awake, who immediately wanted to know what was wrong. My friend was shaken, and he said he would tell him once they got home. He asked him to say a prayer. By the time they made it home, his companion was dying to know what had happened. My friend told him, I looked down at the road next to the car and saw 6 men running on all fours, keeping up with the car. I was driving 40 miles an hour. 6 dudes on all fours keeping up with a car going 40 miles an hour. Usain Bolt, the fastest man of our generation in his best race ever, reached a top speed of 27.33 miles per hour. That's the fastest man in the world running the fastest he's ever run on 2 legs, and he still doesn't come close to touching what the car was doing. One thing is definitely clear from doing this video, guys. Skinwalkers, if they are real, are clearly fast as hell. And if one decides that it wants to target you, I don't know if you're gonna be able to escape. Number 5 on this list is the human animal. Yeah, you heard that right, guys. The story that we're dealing with here is of a creature that wasn't quite human, but it also wasn't quite animal either. CVLT Nation says, in July 2004 near Gallup, New Mexico, I had my first and only encounter with a skinwalker. Before this, I used to say, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, I'm a believer now. What I saw was not full human nor full animal. I was moving and had just completed the cleaning and was with my 10-year-old son. We had called it a night and were headed to our new place. As we walked out the front door, I saw a figure move from behind my neighbor's car to a nearby tree that stood between our apartments. It didn't have red glowing eyes, snarling teeth, or a rotten smell. It did move quickly, but not quick enough to avoid the light from a nearby light post and the porch lights. It didn't look at me or come toward me. It moved as if trying to avoid being seen. I was within 15 feet of it, but I did not look back to fully inspect it. What I saw was a wolf-like animal that sort of resembled the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, just not cartoonish. It had brown fur that completely covered it. It wasn't a pelt, it was a very large wolf. It didn't have any human traits except that it walked on its hind legs. It cowered behind the tree as we got into our vehicle. Now let's try to come up with a logical explanation before we buy into the Skinwalker theory, just to rule things out. Could this have been a bear? Well, maybe, but I kind of doubt it considering our friend here refers to it as a wolf-like creature several times. So he definitely didn't get any bear-like qualities from it, okay? So it's not a bear, well, what about being an actual wolf? I mean, this is probably the most possible, except it literally walked on its hind legs. Wolves have been known to get up on their hind legs for a second or two, maybe just to stand on them for a moment, but they don't specifically walk on them. That's not something that happens, guys. This wasn't a wolf and it wasn't a bear, and it also wasn't a human either. He says it himself. The only really true human characteristics is the fact that it did walk on its hind legs. So it's not a wolf, it's not a bear, it's not a human. What the hell is it? Well, now we're starting to get into Skinwalker territory. I can't really think of any other animal that would have the things he described this one had, other than maybe a skinwalker. Very lucky that the creature didn't attack and he made it out alive.
In at number 4, Navajo. If you ask any Navajo person, they will tell you that skinwalkers are not a myth. They will say that they are 100% real, they are dangerous, and they are powerful. Even uttering their name is a way of summoning them. The Navajo tell the story of the skinwalkers and how they have attacked numerous people. They describe skinwalkers as a giant predator that usually takes the form of a wolf. They hunt at night, keeping in the shadows. When they spot someone, they will stalk them to their homes. For a while, they will watch them and follow them, and then they go in for the kill. There have also been people who claimed they've known someone who's actually looked into a skinwalker's eyes, and when this happens, they become hypnotized. And once this happens, it is said that this creature can actually take that person's shape. Technically, skinwalkers are humans and they do have human motives and human desires, but they do possess a darker nature, and this is why they are so dangerous.
Number 3 on this list is the white mask. This one is kind of similar to the last one we looked at, but instead of a pale white face, it seemed as if the creature was wearing a white mask. Ranker says, in Hunt for the Skinwalker, George Knapp and Colm Kelleher relay the stories of those who came into contact with skinwalkers near Native American tribal lands. One account from a New Mexico highway patrol officer states that while patrolling the highways of New Mexico, he saw a skinwalker on 2 separate occasions. In his first encounter, a creature wearing a white mask appeared next to his window, seemingly attaching itself to the car door. But then he realized it was simply running beside the vehicle, keeping pace at highway speeds. A few days later, and around the same area, he encountered the creature again. What makes this tale even more intriguing is that at least one other officer claimed to have seen the same ghoulish being while patrolling the area. Maybe it was actually a white mask that our friend saw in the previous entry instead of the white face he described. Either way, this one seems dangerous as all holy hell. To be able to run with a car going on the highway? Yeah, that is pretty far from natural, guys. I'd say that considering there were multiple witnesses here, this is probably some of the best proof we have that these creatures are legit.
Coming in at number 2, Skinwalker Ranch. Yes, this is an actual place and it's in Utah. People in Utah will not even enter this area because they know that this area is full of skinwalkers. But that doesn't stop tourists from going there. About this place, the people of Utah have said, "We take this very seriously. We know the skinwalkers are very powerful spirits that are here because of a curse that was put on them generations ago by the Navajos. And the center of the whole legend is the ranch. The ranch is said to be the path of the skinwalkers. Tribe members are strictly forbidden from setting foot on the property. It's been this way for a long time. One very well-known story is that of the Sherman family. In 1994, Terry, Gwen, and their children purchased some property on the ranch despite townspeople warning them not to do so. One night they saw this wolf attacking a calf. So Terry got out his gun and shot the wolf. He shot the wolf 6 times, but the wolf didn't stop and eventually just left on its own accord, completely fine. Terry decided to follow the wolf's tracks, which just simply came to an end as though the wolf ceased to exist. When the family told the town members about what happened, they told them that they just encountered their first skinwalker, and to watch their backs. After this, the Sherman family began reporting a bunch of bizarre-looking animals.
And finally, number 1 on this list is the Ruins of Inquisition. Bit of a creepy name there already, guys. Kind of sounds like a mission in Skyrim or something like that, and I guess based on what happens, it could be. 5 years ago, some friends went out to some ruins in New Mexico. These ruins were critical during the actual Inquisition, hence the name. Well, once they got there, one of the friends started playing on the flute that they brought. They were only 30 seconds into playing the thing when a blood-curdling scream filled the air. It was so loud it almost burst the eardrums off of these guys. Then as the scream was happening, a creature was jumping and running across the tops of the ruins. It was moving so fast that they couldn't even really make out what it was. They thought it was an animal of some type though, but obviously nothing natural. The guys noped on out of there as fast as possible and drove 6 hours in the other direction. What's even crazier though is that when they got to their next destination, which was a campsite, and after they set up their campsite, they came face to face with what they thought was the creature from the ruins. 7 to 10 feet tall, a werewolf human-like creature was staring directly at the guys from the deep darkness. They then ran as fast as they could and noped the hell out of that place too. This time they all went home and just prayed that they weren't followed. But crazy, absolutely crazy to think that they were tracked and followed 6 hours. Only creature that could have done that, in my opinion, is a skinwalker.
Number 5, weird goat. Coming up first on our list of unsettling skinwalker encounters is this strange footage that's been making the rounds around TikTok, and understandably why when you see, how weird this is. Take a quick look for me. It looks like a cute little goat at first. As cute as a goat can be, no goat hate, until it gets up close to the front door and stares. There's just something off about this thing, you know? Goats are kind of weird looking as is, but this one looks like it's got a secret behind its eyes, or it's giving you that look where it's asking you if you have any games on your phone. It just looks wrong, you know? In that indescribable uncanny valley way. Especially as it's shown when the video cuts back again and we see the goats almost got like dog looking eyes. It certainly does not look like any goat that I have ever seen. That's for certain. Now, I couldn't tell you if this is a skinwalker in disguise wearing a goat costume or just a goat being particularly bizarre, which is not entirely unheard of. Goats are considered one of the more demonic animals. They're very commonly associated with Satan and Lucifer and all sorts of hellish manners. It's said that skinwalkers are Dene witches who have gone against the natural order of things and use powerful magic to be able to take the form of any animal that they so please. As some local legends say that a way to suss out a skinwalker is through their eyes, being able to see them shine differently than normal. That would certainly explain what's going on with this goat's bizarre eyes, and unless there's any goat experts out there in the comments that can help me out with this one, I'm really not sure what we're looking at besides something terrifying. And if you're looking for more terrifying stories about skinwalkers, cryptids, aliens, really just about anything scary under the sun, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click through, find something to like, stay subscribed, stay scared, but please, keep watching this video. We did work pretty hard on it. Alright. Back to it. We got way more skinwalker stories for you coming up. Number 4, stray dogs. So for most of these, I found some stories from people on Reddit who claimed that they had experiences with skinwalkers, and all of them are really cool stuff, so I thought I'd share them along with you. Our first one coming up is going to be someone who says this was a family experience they had. This happened to their brother, and I'll paraphrase it ever so slightly for content guidelines, but the story at large is mostly the same. In 2015, my brother worked for a security guard hiring place. I don't really know what you'd call it. Basically, he would call and they would station him someplace or another that needed it. So this particular time, my brother got hired by a local cemetery, as they'd had issues with people sneaking in, going so far as to even break a couple graves. No good? Anyways, his job was to drive around the cemetery and make sure no one was messing around. And this area was pretty rural and had a stray dog problem. Dogs would get lost, or people would abandon them and they would roam the countryside. One night, my brother was stationed at the cemetery and he noticed a big pack of dogs, around 8 or so. He said it was a good assortment, including a tiny little Bichon Frise that had the harness still on and a big old Rottweiler. My brother is driving around real slow and he has the window down when he hears the dogs going wild. And then he hears a sound he described as sounding like that screaming bird from the swamp episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Quick little aside, Taylor again. I hope that's a great frame of reference for you guys, because I've never seen that show, so I got no idea. Okay, story time again. He says he sees something fast and pale running in front of the headlights, and the dogs all start freaking out again. So, he follows the dogs in fear that they're going to tear something up. He parks his car and he hears a faint call for help. He shines his light and he sees that the dogs have chased the deer, except the deer was pale, gray, and emaciated. No antlers, and its eyes were completely pitch black. The Rottweiler tried to jump the deer but was thrown off. The creature screeched and then ran into the night on all fours. He never worked for that company again. Bone chiller, eh? What do you guys think? Too good to be true or too true to be good? Number 3, Iowa sighting. Our next story comes to us from Reddit once again, from the subreddit r/true scary stories. Not to imply the other stories we've been sharing are fake, just that these ones are definitely real. And quick shout out for the Reddit scary horror story community as a whole, putting all these campfire stories in one beautiful digital archive. Coming to us from a user, a Weird Doggo 64, love that name. They write, as a native, I think me and my mother had a close call with a skinwalker. Now this story I had to trim just the tiniest little bit for timing purposes, so it's paraphrased ever so slightly, but the story has been mostly left intact. My family has lived in Iowa since July of 2017, and we live in a small neighborhood with a minimum of maybe 25 houses, and it's surrounded by forestry. I've seen a bunch of horror movies over the years, so I get pretty paranoid. A year into living there, we get a new dog, and we named him Tucker. He's an energetic little guy with everybody. Now a couple years later, my mom and dad get divorced, and she moved on to a guy that lives a couple miles away from the house. My mom and dad settled on a pretty good schedule for when they could spend the day with us. Now my mom's side is my native side, and we do believe in the lore of skinwalkers. One day it's my mom's turn to look after us. She's driving up this road surrounded by a bunch of trees and farms. There's a hill on this road, and as my mom drove up the hill, she saw something in a field that she described as being tall, gray skinned, and had hooves for feet, and it was walking into the woods. Well, when she reached to a stop sign, she looked back in her mirror and nothing. Now my mom was terrified because she remembered the stories of skinwalkers she would hear as a girl. A couple days later it was nighttime and my dog had to go outside to the bathroom. I put him on a leash that's connected to the porch. I turned on a light that was outside so I could see where he was going, and I heard him barking. I walked towards the door and I told him to get in, and I look into the darkness to see nothing but eyes shining from the porch light. I pulled him in and I slammed the door as soon as he got outside. I covered every window in the house. It's been 2 months since then, and my routine when it gets dark was what I did when I saw those eyes. I closed the blinds, I locked the doors, and I turn off the lights. Something creeping in the dark? Raccoons? Skinwalkers? What do you think? Number 2, Skinwalker sighting. This was posted to the Skinwalker subreddit. I stumbled upon this forum after my friend had sent me a link a day or two after I had told him my story on the res. This story is 100% true. Whether you believe me or not is up to you. I'm just sharing what had happened to me. This all took place a long time ago when I was much younger. I'm Indigenous Mexican and Navajo. The cultural difference is somewhat large. I tend to practice my cultural roots within my Nahua side, but I'm also very close to my native family that resides in the States. My family had planned a trip to Arizona, and we'd made arrangements to stay with some family that lived on that reservation. Though, considering how small dwellings are on the res, my parents thought it would still be a good idea to stay at least a few days, and my brother and I would get to go see our cousins. The first day, being the moody teens we were, my cousin and I thought it would be fun to roam the open fields surrounding the res. We were hoping we'd get away from all the noise, and we ended up going off pretty far. Far enough that the houses were out of sight. About halfway back, we noticed a coyote off in the distance. Nothing weird, but we didn't want to get close to it. But that's when it got kind of weird. We heard someone whistling, calling from somewhere around the coyote, but it was something like you'd hear when someone was calling a dog back. It kind of spooked us, so we headed on back. The next day, I started getting headaches. As night rolled around, our parents were out, so my cousins and I played video games for a while until we heard footsteps outside. My brother wanted someone to look out the window with him. I did, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but then the noises started to come back. And I started to get the most painful headache that I've ever got. I remember crying and feeling so dizzy, never having felt that much pain before. The next day, I saw that same coyote again outside. The same coyote. It was bigger than most I'd seen, and it stared at me unblinking. I heard the same whistling. It had patches of fur missing and looking at me, and it made me feel so sick. I closed and locked the window and left the room. I thought of every mundane possibility. And us natives don't throw around the word skinwalker at every creepy experience, I promise. I just can't find an explanation for why I felt so bad and icky. Honestly, reading that one out loud again still freaked me out. Alright, I saved the best for last for you. At number 1, the new property. Our final story comes to us from someone who might have cursed themselves into moving into a haunted property. Let's take a listen to this posted on a paranormal subreddit by user 1additional2103. It starts by saying, "We've been living at this new house for 13 days. We've been taking some suggestions for cleansing the home to get any bad vibes out, but there's a creepy pattern happening. For the 3rd time, I just found bones just outside our door." Whoa. Stop the track. Stop the music. Stop the narration. Stop everything. This was the 3rd time you found bones outside your front door, and you didn't burn your house down and move 6 states over. Anyway, okay, yeah, moving on. A few nights ago, there was a pile of smaller bones by the door leading to the front porch. This is a really clear message. On one of the first few nights, there was a long bone by the rear door right where I found a deer skull. I didn't think anything of it the first few times. Again, aside, I'm not sure why, but whatever, I gotta move on from this. Assuming the long bone was left there by a previous owner, and I chalked up the pile to an animal, but it's kind of weird that it's happened 3 times now, and each time by a door. The other strange things happening to me are I can't get the motion lights to work outside at all. They were already installed. I changed bulbs twice now in them, and they worked when I went inside, but the next night they didn't. So I'm just chalking this one up to bad wiring. A few times I've heard very strange sounds coming from the woods. I'm an avid hunter and I do a lot of camping, and I've never heard anything like this before. It kind of sounds like a propeller chopping through wood. Do either of these things sound like I'm dealing with something out of my league? I'm sorry if these are dumb questions and stories, but there's just something about this property that makes me worried. Dude, you mentioned that bones keep showing up on your front door. You live in the same forest as the Blair Witch, man. You gotta move. Yeah, you're dealing with something above your head. Oh, you don't even need to go to the internet or Reddit for this one. Number 5, CCTV footage. How on earth did we ever find cryptids and other paranatural beings before we started putting cameras on every street corner and inside everybody's pocket? If for nothing else, I've got to say the surveillance state era has made it way easier to find footage of weird things running around in the dark. Take a look at this extremely creepy footage that we found posted to Reddit. Recorded here is what someone described as a skinwalker caught on camera, and honestly I'm pretty inclined to agree. Let's roll it. Pretty darn creepy, huh? At first glance, you would totally be forgiven for thinking that's a demon or a dog monster. And it's only when you brave up and look through the cracks in your fingers, you're willing to take another look, you realize what you're watching is a human being running by on all fours, like perfectly like an animal. Whoever this is running on all fours better than I run on 2s. This is one of the freakiest things I've seen in a good while, and I literally exclusively watch freaky content online all day, every day for my job, so it stands out. This one actually made me recoil. I've never seen a human being move like that. Well, allegedly a human. That's why we're including it in this video. Could this be a human? Or is this another being altogether? Some powerful shapeshifter caught mid-transformation, dashing through a Walmart parking lot at 2 in the morning? Now, there's not much information to be found about this, but I still did my digging for you just because I care. From what I could garner and gather, the footage was recorded in Mexico a few years back, at the start of 2020, and a few Redditors who were helping me out said that apparently it was a little bit of like a national meme. So if we have any Mexican viewers out there who can confirm or deny this and saw this footage and started laughing, I would love to hear from you about it, because I do want to get to the bottom of one of the weirdest things I've seen in a minute. Prank, hoax, real deal or not, I don't really know about that, but what I can guarantee you is that whatever it is genuinely terrifying. And if you're looking for loads more scary content of shapeshifters or all things paranatural, well, I like to think Top 5 Scary is the #1 place to be. We've got our fingers in a little bit of everything scary on the globe, so click through, find something to shriek at or fall asleep to, I'm not judging. Subscribe and stay scared, but finish this video first before you click away. We got more Skinwalker scares coming up for you. Number 4, Idaho. Now, Idaho is pretty well known in the paranormal community as being a place where a lot of strange stuff is going on. It's no Ohio, but it's up there as far as scary states go. Our first freaky story is gonna come to us from a Redditor, Chuck Wool, sharing their story on the Skinwalker subreddit. Here we go, listen to this. It was mid-November 2021 and me and a bunch of friends were camping in the woods in the Sawtooth National Forest near Petite Lake. There were 2 groups of people in 2 tents and 1 in a car, and my buddy and I in hammocks near the edge of the camp. It's about 1 a.m. and we had all been sleeping for about 2 hours. I wake up to my hammock mate panting extremely heavily and yelling my name, and I'm a bit confused and I get up and help him. He's paralyzed by fear. He said that he had extremely vivid dreams, that there was a tall and slender, all black figure trying to break into his car after he'd seen the figure take my head off and the rest of our friends. You know, normal, everyday, fun campfire dreams under the stars kind of deal. He said that he woke up and he swore he saw the figure near the car and that he saw all of our heads on sticks. I was obviously pretty freaked out at this point, as I think most people would be, and I immediately felt very uneasy. I told him it was just a bad dream and that he should go back to sleep. One of our buddies yells, proceeding to wake up most of the camp, and we find that our friend in the car that my buddy said clicked the car alarm. So all of us, scared and awake now, have a conversation about what is going on. And my friend in the car says that he heard something scratching on the window and said that he saw a slender black figure running around the car. And the next morning we all talked about what had happened. And 6 of them all had similar nightmares describing similar things. Tall, slender black figures, heads on pikes, the whole scary 9 yards. We had friends that had stayed at the same site 6 months earlier, and a few of them felt like they were being watched. There are strange things afoot in the Idaho mountains. So what do we think, my top 5 scary gang? Skinwalkers? Witches? Slender Man? Or just something in the coffee? Number 3, tried to lure me. Now our next one is a personal recounting from someone who thinks that they might have encountered a creature up close when they were younger. Same deal as before, paraphrased ever so slightly just for timing and content guideline purposes, but otherwise intact and presented to you how it was presented. Every summer, my family and I go up to camp in Ellsworth, Maine, and it's about a 3-hour drive from my house. The camp itself is about an hour from the nearest town. I've been going here my entire life, and I've never had something strange like this happen before. I was watching TV in the middle of the night when I heard a noise coming from the kitchen, and I realized that the dogs were going to need to go outside to do their doggy business. So I took them outside. I walked to the front yard and I took the dogs off the leash. It's incredibly dark in the woods in Maine, so I tried to keep my eyes on them. I was momentarily distracted seeing a loon on the lake. When I looked back, I saw that the dogs were looking at something in the woods. I couldn't see what it was, but I just assumed that they'd seen a squirrel or a raccoon. It was then that I realized I didn't see my third dog. She's a small dog and she's completely black. I heard some whimpering, so I stepped out and called out to her again, worried that she got stuck somewhere. Suddenly, I felt something close to me. I looked down and my Alfie was there, I just hadn't seen her. So I started thinking, if Alfie was with me, what was it that I'd heard? The other 2 dogs began to growl. They were walking towards the blackness of the woods. I picked up Alfie and began to back up when I heard the most absolutely bone-chilling thing I have ever heard in my life. I heard something calling Alfie's name. It sounded like it was trying to mimic me, but it was just wrong. The voice sounded distorted. I ran inside with the dogs, and I have no idea what was in the woods. It's been said that a skinwalker's mimicry doesn't just extend to their ability to change shape, but also to mimic speech. Could this have been a close encounter? How else would someone in the woods know the name of the storyteller's dog? Something to think about, and something to keep you awake all night. Number 2. Wow, man, my titles for this one are really good, eh? Sighting. Skinwalker sighting. Our next story was also posted to the Skinwalker subreddit by user MothGirl11. It's the freshest one up on the list too, posted just 11 days ago, so I hope they're doing well. It starts by saying, I have recently learned what skinwalkers are, and it completely made sense of an event that had happened to me when I was younger that I previously blocked out of my brain. I was visiting my mom's family in California with my parents and siblings. I'd been there before before, and I always slept alone on an air mattress in the living room, which had a greenhouse glass pane wall to the front of the house. It was a usual summer evening and everyone was settled into bed. I remembered that I used to like staying up late playing games on my DS. Yeah, I've been getting a little sleepy when I started to hear strange rustling noises coming from the outside. I sat up and peered outside, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. The road outside was dimly lit. A few minutes pass and I tell myself it's just a strange animal or something. I laid myself back down, something across the street caught my eye, and I darted back up. Silently, I saw what appeared to be two coyote-like figures, only they were walking on their hind legs, which looked much bigger than their front ones. They appeared to be 6, maybe 7 feet tall, and the scariest part was there was absolutely no noise while they moved. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. One of them turned to look towards me, and I ducked my head down. At the time, I didn't think anything other than that I was freaked out. I never asked anyone about it, and it was only as an adult that I realized that there are no animals like the ones I saw. You've got to be a really brave kid, I think, to see two 7-foot-tall bipedal coyotes and think, yeah, that's just something coyotes do. I would spend the rest of my life buying silver bullets and drawing like salt circles on the floor. Woof. Alright, and number 1. Our final entry is one last story from user Lisha Ninja to round out our Skinwalker story collection, and honestly, I think it's the spookiest one of the bunch, definitely the most high-octane energy action story. Let me waste no more time introducing and let's get into it. Lisha Ninja writes, "This is a story my family told me when I was growing up. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her 2 brothers were coming home alone when my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house and, like many people from the res, didn't have electricity. It'd been dark outside for about an hour and my aunt and uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside they heard noises, as if someone moving outside. My uncle went out to the front window and saw someone outside of his truck, which was out of the ordinary to say the least because the closest neighbor was miles away, and my aunt and uncle were frightened. They knew they had to take action. So my uncle took the rifle and readied himself. They flung open the door and aimed at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, unfazed by the drawn long arm. My uncle squeezed the trigger but nothing came out. The figure drew closer and closer and my aunt began to smell the stench of a dead body. It was so strange she started to gag. My uncle continued to pull at the trigger but nothing was coming out and the shadowy figure began to approach. Off in the distance, my grandparents were returning and their headlights shone up the road. This figure looked at the lights and started to move away. My uncle pushed forward to the truck with the rifle drawn. My grandfather got out of the car and my uncle pointed at the truck. My grandfather immediately ran inside, grabbed a handful of ashes, and rubbed it over the gun's barrel. Whatever it was didn't expect this weapon to go off. My grandfather and uncle chased after the creature, and my uncle swears that when the headlights flickered on it, he saw a woman, but running on all fours the way a bear would. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch, it drops about 20 feet. He got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared, and that he knew it was her, and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed away. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, you say their name, and it'll end them. Whew.